The Horror Movie Heroes by Clouds. My Head in the Clouds, Not Coming Down on AO3. Read for you by Teddy BB Bear. This fic is based on the original work My Hero Academia by Kohei Horikoshi. Hitoshi nervously straightened the paper again as he and Midoriya walked up to his foster home. It wasn't like the paper was that valuable. They just used the printer at the library to make a few copies of the permission waiver for the UA training exercise. So, printing another wouldn't be a big deal or anything. But the paper felt valuable, just because of what it represented. If they could both convince their parents, well, in Hitoshi's case, his guardians, to approve it, then they'd not only be able to practice all the strategies that they were learning, but see how they matched up in a real fight against UA students. He wasn't sure how far they'd get, obviously, since the UA students would have way more training than the two of them. But Midoriya was right. It would be a good way to get their names out there and make themselves stand out from the tens of thousands of other kids who would be trying for the hero course next year, assuming they could actually convince their guardians to sign off on it. He held open the door for Midoriya and waited for him to take off his shoes before leading him back into the kitchen. His foster parents should be home now, and even though they'd be tired from work, there probably wasn't any better time to have this conversation. That didn't mean that Hitoshi wasn't tempted to turn around and run in the other direction, rather than risk getting in trouble though. His foster dad was sitting at the table, reading a newspaper as his foster mom made dinner. But neither of them saw the two come in. Hitoshi scuffed the floor with his heel, making just enough non-vocal noise to get his foster dad to look up from his paper. Hitoshi's stomach sunk as he did a double take between Hitoshi and Midoriya, before his face hardened into a clearly displeased expression. "Hitoshi, you didn't tell us you'd be bringing a friend over." "Oh, sorry." Midoriya had an innocently guilty expression on his face. "I kinda insisted on coming over at the last minute, and I was totally talking Shinso's ear off, so he didn't really have time to text you. Right, you're probably wondering, my name is Izuku Midoriya. You must be Shinso's parents." Foster Dad frowned, but looked a lot less angry than before, which made Hitoshi relax slightly. Having Midoriya take the blame for a last-minute visit seemed like it had been a good plan, even though the truth was that they'd planned it. His foster parents didn't really like him talking to them at all, even though he'd already tried telling them that his quirk didn't work over texting. Midoriya, however, was just energetic enough that they'd both decided he might be able to pass it off as an accident. "So you go to school with Hitoshi?" foster mom asked. "No, we met after school one day," Midoriya replied brightly. "The kids at my own school don't really like me." Hitoshi caught a gleam of satisfaction in Midoriya's eyes as his foster mom frowned in pity. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Midoriya shrugged, but didn't respond. To have the greatest chance of success, they needed to fit themselves into the narrative that his foster parents already believed, namely, that Hitoshi was dangerous and no one would willingly be friends with him. They would be more likely to believe that Midoriya was hanging out with him because he lacked better options, and it was safer than them thinking that Hitoshi was somehow manipulating, or worse, brainwashing him into being friends. Hence the careful reluctance, which seemed to be working perfectly. "So, Midoriya," foster dad closed his newspaper. "Are you here for dinner, or—" "Oh!" Midoriya grabbed the paper from Hitoshi, like he'd just barely remembered it. "Yes, I actually wanted to ask you guys something. I'm going to be going to this camp, and I was wondering if Shinso could come along. It doesn't cost anything, but we do need parental permission." "A camp?" Foster dad hesitantly accepted the paper from Midoriya. "What kind of camp?" "Well, it's kind of a training camp." Midoriya grimaced. "You see, I want to be a hero, but honestly, I don't really have a very good chance, so this is kind of to help me get a better idea of everything, and see if it's even possible, you know?" Foster Dad hummed thoughtfully, but Hitoshi could tell he was still on the fence. "And you want Hitoshi to come with you? You know he doesn't have a good shot at being a hero either, right?" "I think Hitoshi can be a great hero," Midoriya said firmly, eyes widening after a moment as he noticed his slip. "But, I mostly want him to be there, so I don't have to be alone. It's an entire week, and we sleep there, so he wouldn't be home for an entire week. I know that's probably a deal-breaker, but—" "No, that'll work," Foster Dad said quickly, pen flourishing across the paper. "Just be careful, kid, okay?" Hitoshi fought back a smile as Izuku grinned triumphantly. Don't worry, I will be. Kyoka blew a strand of hair out of her face, only for it to fall right back in front of her eyes. She would have just used her hand to brush it back, but both her hands were kind of busy at the moment, looking around a broken microwave. She'd never really been the strongest girl out there, so after less than a week of All Might's crazy clean the beach routine, her arms already felt like they were about to fall off. She was sure that the extra muscle would be useful and would really help her out in the hero course, but at the same time, this whole training program seemed just kinda illogical. It wasn't that she was complaining. Okay, well, maybe she kinda was. But anybody would be complaining if they were asked to clean an entire polluted beach by themselves. Like, she saw the appeal of building muscle, and All Might had insisted that without enough muscle mass, his quirk would blow her arms off. But there were still some things that just weren't adding up. First of all, she wasn't even sure she wanted One for All. Sure, All Might and Recovery Girl had both said it was an amazing opportunity, and if she'd been allowed to tell her parents, she had no doubt that her dad would be pushing her to jump in with 2 feet. But for now, all she'd committed to doing was train to receive the quirk. So far, all that meant was a lot of muscle training, which, again, didn't make a whole lot of sense. One for All focused on strength, obviously. Anyone who had seen All Might fight could see that much. But at the same time, Kyoka just couldn't bring herself to believe that that's all there was to it. Quirks just weren't that simple. Take her own quirk, for example. Sure, it enhanced her hearing, but it also allowed her to project her heartbeat, not to mention the fact that it had a mutation element to it as well. It didn't fall into a neat little category because her quirk wasn't a one-trick pony. And she was pretty sure that was true for most quirks. One for All shouldn't be any different. She dumped the microwave in the truck they were using and stretched out her arms as she walked back to get another piece of garbage. All Might was a strong hero, but his go-to solution was usually to punch things, which meant that for him, the solution was always to have bigger muscles than his opponent and force his way to victory by sheer strength and force of will. But, well, as much as Kyoka hated criticizing All Might, that didn't always work. When she was singing, muscling through a difficult passage could do more harm than good. Instead of trying to get stronger in that case, the best thing to do was improve the technique and airflow so that she got a good quality sound without hurting herself. It was the same with her instruments. A guitar could be made of the strongest wood on earth, but if the player didn't know how to use it, it would still sound terrible. There had to be some technique elements to using One for All that she should be preparing for in addition to just building muscle. Kyoka sighed and picked up a tire. Maybe she was just overcomplicating things. All Might seemed to be doing okay for himself, and he only focused on muscle strength. Besides, who else was she supposed to ask? All Might had insisted that One for All was a huge secret that only a small handful knew about, so her best option was probably just to keep learning from the master and assume that All Might knew what he was doing. He was the expert after all, right? No, Sakauchi, I don't need either of their help. I've had One for All for decades now. I know what I'm doing. Kyoka paused as she heard All Might's voice filtering through the piles of trash. She wasn't quite sure where he was, but he was talking loud enough that her enhanced hearing could pick him up easily enough, even over the sound of the waves. Whoever he was talking to obviously knew about One for All, but All Might hadn't even told her about anyone named Sakauchi before. I'm not saying that you don't, but they might still be able to help. Sakauchi's voice was distorted in a way that meant this was a phone call, and Kyoka was tempted to walk away so she wouldn't overhear. But if All Might was going to be giving her his quirk, he didn't have any rights to keep secrets about it. I mean, Nana got help from Gran Torino when she was training you, right? Nana only relied on Gran Torino to guide me, because she knew what that monster would do to her, and to me, if she left me without any guidance, All Might said coldly. I can handle this. I'm going to be teaching at UA as well, so I'm going to have to learn sometime. Also, Gran Torino is absolutely terrifying. Young Jiro still has a lot of work ahead of her, and I don't want him traumatizing her. Well, what about Night Eye? Sakauchi asked. Have you even told him you found a successor? There was a long moment of silence before All Might answered. We haven't spoken to each other in years, Sakauchi. I doubt telling him now would go over very well. Kyoka shifted the tire so that it was on her shoulder, and she could grab her phone with her other hand, sending herself a message with the names All Might and this Tsukauchi dude had mentioned. Maybe there were other people she could ask for advice. It never hurt to get a new perspective, right? Unlike Hitoshi's foster parents, Izuku's mom actually read the whole permission slip before looking at them worriedly. This says you might get hurt, baby. Are you sure you want to do this? It's the best way to figure out what being a hero really is, Izuku insisted, grateful for Hitoshi's presence at his side during this conversation. I know that it looks really cool on TV, and that every little kid wants to be a hero, but I'm not a little kid anymore. I know this exercise might be dangerous, but it's way more controlled than typical hero work. They have Recovery Girl, who's the best healing hero working right now, and all sorts of other precautions to keep people from getting hurt in the first place. It'll give me a good sense for what the hero industry actually is, and I'd really rather know now if it's really too dangerous for me, rather than figure that out in the middle of an actual hero fight where I could get seriously injured. Oh. Mom bit her lip and looked down at the paper again. So, you think this exercise will help you decide whether you can really handle being a hero? Even though he knew it was coming, Izuku's stomach still sank. He'd been the one to come up with this strategy of fitting their request for permission into their parents' existing prejudices, but it still stung that the only way to get his mom to say yes was to let her believe that this was the final push he needed to give up on his dream. He swallowed his nausea and forced himself to smile. Yeah, that's basically the point of the exercise. Mom nodded and turned to Hitoshi. And you're going with him? Hitoshi nodded. It's safer to have someone there so we can watch each other's backs. Mom was tense for a moment, but after it became clear that Hitoshi wasn't going to ask her a question, she relaxed and picked up the pen. Okay, but I need you to promise to be careful, okay, baby? Don't take any unnecessary risks, and if there's someone you don't think you can beat, just run, okay? Izuku nodded, and he glanced over at Hitoshi, who looked just as happy and relieved as he felt. Don't worry, we'll make sure we can win. Hello, my bumblebees. It's Teddy BB Bear here. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed this wonderful story by Clouds, My Head in the Clouds, Not Coming Down. This podfic is brought to you as a Project Cyclone production. More info about other projects we've worked on in the description, as well as links to our website and Instagram. If you want to support Project Cyclone and all our future productions, please consider joining our Patreon, or sharing our content through word of mouth. We really appreciate your support. It makes it possible for me and my friends behind the scenes to keep making content for you guys. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on whatever platform you may be listening to us. Sweet dreams and a restful hibernation to you all. Bye-bye.